Hi, my name is Nancy Pearsall and I live in Austin, Texas with my husband and our cat son, Maurice. Last year, at the age of 44, I discovered that I'm autistic. I'm also an ADHDer, and one of my special interests has always been the unseen. Many of you know me from an Instagram account that I run called Enigma Creative, and I've been promising to share some of my experiences as a neurodivergent person for a while now. I thought that it would be appropriate to share my experiences starting about now because many cultures regard this time of year as being the point in time within the calendar that the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead is at its thinnest. For example, the Celtic pagans observed Samhain, and in Mexico, November 1st marks the kickoff of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, a vibrant festival where people celebrate the lives of their loved ones that have passed on. It was late July in 1988. Since I was still so young, I was still living at my parents' house. One night when I went to sleep, I began to dream, and as the evening passed on, one particular dream became much more vivid than anything that came before it in the night. It may have been around 5 or 6 in the morning. I really have no idea because I was asleep. But in this dream, at the beginning of the awareness point of this particular part of the dream, I was sitting at the head of a large conference table. Seated around the table were a bunch of older adults in business suits. Some of them were probably middle-aged, some of them about the age that I am right now, some were older, and they were all staring at me. Again, I was sitting at the head of the table, and they were sitting there, some of them with their hands folded in front of them on their table, and they looked as though they knew who I was. They even looked as though they had recently been talking about me. I had a very strange feeling that I had sort of popped in or dropped in from out of nowhere, and suddenly I had interrupted their meeting, or suddenly I had joined their meeting. I tried turning my head to get a better sense of my surroundings in the room, but I immediately found that I could not turn my head at all. I could only look around by moving my eyes. And in the corner of my vision, on my left-hand side, I could see the edge of somebody sitting down next to me. Like I could see their knees and maybe their hands and maybe a little bit of their hair. And I had a very distinct feeling that this person was somehow different from everybody sitting around the table, that this person had a different role for me than everybody else in the room with me. And so as I was sitting there trying to understand what I was doing there, and I was trying to look around, there was really one thing in the room that was grabbing my attention even more than the people in the room with me. And that was a bright white light up in the top right corner of the room that was pulsating. It wasn't a light bulb, it wasn't static. It had rays that were reaching down, reaching out. It was very, very bright, and it felt conscious to me. And suddenly the person sitting next to me, who I couldn't see, spoke. And he said, "When I lived on Earth, I had a dog and it died." And I remember opening my eyes in my bedroom, laying in my bed, opening my eyes and replying, "Pity," which was a strange thing to say, I know, but I had been reading a lot of Victorian fiction, but like, "Pity your dog died." For that split second that I opened my eyes in bed and I said that, I was aware that I could not move. I couldn't turn my head. And then I closed my eyes again. And this is where the dream stopped feeling like a regular dream. Because when I opened my eyes again, I was leaning forward on the bathroom countertop in my home, only I could physically feel things that were around me in my environment, as though my body was actually touching them. I was leaning forward on the counter, looking at my face in the mirror, and I could feel how cold and hard the countertop was underneath my elbows as I was leaning forward. As I was looking at my face in the mirror, it suddenly occurred to me how exhausted and tired I felt, and I was overwhelmed by the urge to go back to bed. So I stood up, and when I stood up, I physically felt my torso straightening. I felt my shoulders going back, and I turned to open the door of the bathroom to walk out into the hallway and go back into my bedroom. As I opened the bathroom door, I was a bit shocked to see that when I opened the door, there was a tall man standing in my doorway. He was probably, I don't know, maybe 6'3" tall. He was blocking the doorway. He had long, dark brown hair, probably to his waist. He was not Caucasian. He had features that to me appeared to be perhaps Native American. He had high cheekbones. He had warm, toned skin, and he was just standing there. He wouldn't let me pass. And although aesthetically he was quite attractive, I did not feel attracted to him in that sort of way. In fact, what I felt was really more of an annoyance, and something in me told me that he picked up on that and that amused him. And I realized that just based on how he felt, his energy, for lack of a better word, felt, he was the person that had been sitting next to me at the conference table. I was really, really tired, and I asked him to move. I said, could you please, let me step by? I really want to go back to bed. And he threw back his head and he just started laughing at me. It was like he thought that was hilarious. But he wasn't budging, and I was getting really annoyed with him now. And I don't know why, but I didn't have any fear. He was getting on my nerves, so I pushed past him, and I still remember the feeling of my left arm like pushing past him, like bumping into him. So I walked past him, I went out into the hallway, I entered my bedroom. My bed was on the left-hand side of the room. I still remember the way the morning light was coming in through my window of my bedroom. It filled it with kind of a soft, warm, golden light. You would think morning light would be blue, but it was a warm light. And I didn't look at my bed. I just sort of turned around and climbed in. But when I climbed into my bed, it didn't feel like a soft mattress underneath me. It felt very hard. It felt like I was climbing onto something with sharp edges that was very hard, almost like a pile of bricks. So I'm laying there in bed, and I'm kind of feel like I'm tossing and turning a little bit, trying to get comfortable. And I close my eyes and I open them, and to my surprise, the guy is standing at the side of my bed, on the right side of my bed, and he's looking down at me. And he's looking down at me with kind of a neutral expression. And I was just annoyed by him. And he was pressing down on my abdomen with his hands as he was like kind of looking at me. And it was nothing sexual. He wasn't hurting me in any way, but I didn't understand what was happening. And I just wanted him to go away so I could get some more sleep. So over a period of seconds, I would close my eyes, open them to see if he was still there. He was still there. And finally, I closed them and I opened them, and he had finished pressing down on me. He leaned over me and he kissed me on my left eyelid. And then I closed my eyes again, and when I opened them, he was gone. I continued to lay in bed for some time, frozen and unable to move. I was finally able to move my head enough to see what time, I had an alarm clock over here on my bedstand or bed night table. I was finally able to see what time it was and see how much time was passing before I was able to actually get up. And it was at least 20 minutes. And when I finally got up, I had a really bad headache. And just to clarify, at this point, I was 12 years old. I was not drinking or drugging. It was a headache from something else. All that day, as the day went on, I was doing my chores. It was summertime, school was not in session, and I just kept thinking, I kept reliving the events of the previous night, early morning, over and over. And I had a deep hunger, a need to know more about this experience, and I didn't know how to get more information except to ask for God's help. That night at bedtime, I prayed to God to see the man one more time so that I could get more information about what had happened. And I had a dream. I had a dream about him that night. It felt like a normal dream, but I still feel that it's significant that I dreamt what I did. He and I were standing side by side. He was on my right side, on a long white stretch of beach. The beach was snow white, and it was going off into the horizon line. And off to the left-hand side, there was an enormous lake that was lavender colored. The water was a beautiful light purple, and it was going in and out like a tide, but something told me that it was important to know that this was not an ocean, this was a lake. And we started walking down the beach, and I was struck again by how tall he was and how I wasn't attracted to him at all. But he, and I'm just thinking, who is this person? And I said to him, what do I call you? And he said, Edge. And then he kept walking down the beach, and he walked off into the distance. I knew something told me I wasn't supposed to follow him. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Keep in mind that this was a long time before the internet became popular. I didn't have access to the internet to Google any of these, things, keywords. There were no chat rooms, there were no online communities that I was aware of. I felt very isolated in my experience. I didn't even have names for the things that I had experienced to find out more about them. It was only through digging through Encyclopedia Britannica, which my parents owned a set, for probably about a year, until I finally stumbled upon the terms sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience. Growing up, I kept this experience largely to myself, mostly because the first person that I told, which was somebody in my immediate family, didn't believe a word that I said. So I didn't talk about it too much, maybe to a couple of friends here and there throughout the years. Over 3 decades later, I was diagnosed as having sleep apnea and also dysautonomia, which is when your autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary bodily functions such as breathing, is dysregulated. And so it has occurred to me now that it's entirely possible that I was having a sleep apnea episode at the age of 12, and I held my breath for so long, I don't know, possibly could have died for a moment. I'm sure that some of you watching are familiar with the fact that the band U2 has a member in it who goes by the nickname The Edge. I was not even aware of that at the time that this happened, so he's no relation. A few months ago, I was relating this experience to a fellow autistic who is also spiritually sensitive, and she suggested, or she said that in her experience, she is aware that there are certain souls that kind of operate, between the veil, looking for souls who are displaced souls who have perhaps left their body before they are meant to, and they sort of go around and pick them up and do what's needed to get them put back in their bodies. So when she mentioned that, it again kind of brought to mind my question, if not a theory, that perhaps that is the role that Edge played with me. Perhaps when he was pushing down on me, was he helping me to reintegrate into my body? I don't know, and I don't know if I'll ever know. But one thing I do know is that this experience changed me forever, because it showed me that we are not alone, that reality as we know it, there's more to it than many of us think, and than most of us perhaps experience. It also did sort of deter me from pursuing these sorts of things for a number of years because it scared me so badly. But it didn't keep me away forever. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're interested in hearing more stories of mine, hit the subscribe button. Cheers!